Welcome, dear friends, for this special Sunday service when we are privileged to have revered Swami Prapandananda, the head of the Vedanta Society of Sacramento in California. Many of you have heard his retreat that he gave yesterday, and today he will be giving a speech on the pure in heart. Just a few details about the Swami, that he joined the Ramakrishna order. He came to become a monk there in 1966 and got his monastic vows in 1976. So you can see he is almost actually 50 years in the order, and he was for about 21 years he was in Rajkot center and in Gujarat, and came to Sacramento in California in 1989. And since then he has been preaching Vedanta not only there but at many different places in United States. So I request him to begin his lecture.
I first thank Swami Yogatmananda for inviting me to this Providence Center. Yesterday I had the good opportunity of enjoying the company of devotees in the form of a retreat. And then this morning, as he told, I had the opportunity of going to, he did not mention, I think, I went to Boston and gave a talk there. And now, today's evening talk that he has requested me to give, the subject was chosen by him. In a sense, he asked me to choose the subject, but I told that I do not know what you like, so you better choose a subject and I shall speak on that. Of course, I gave some hint where to choose that he had definitely followed. Now let us begin. The entire essence of Christianity, as you know, as well as of all other religions, has been put into that one sentence, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God." This is the Jesus Christ, as you know, teaching, and it is very important teaching in a sense that on that teaching, all the religions, that means on the purity of heart, that means if somebody has purity heart, actually he will have he has captured the essence of a religion, and he has the possibility means that is the only way God can be realized. No other virtue but purity has been mentioned as the condition precedent for the realization of God. So we have to practice purity, and without purity it is not possible to have the realization of God, that all the spiritual teachers have said. Then there are definitely some other virtues that has been mentioned, like poverty, suffering, meekness, humility, desire for righteousness, mercy, etc. And they may enable one to enjoy particular aspect of spiritual, what is called exaltation. We may feel good that we are spiritual by practicing this. That is good. It is not that those virtues are bad, but still it is not complete. That is the point. But the enjoyment of God, which is the culmination of our yearnings, is reserved only for the pure in spirit. As a practical demonstration of this virtue of purity, Jesus Christ said, quote, "Except ye be converted and become a little children, if ye become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven." So this is also another aspect of spirituality that he has said, that without purity in the heart, just like children, you know, by nature they are pure because their mind is still not really affected by the worldly things. So they are the symbol of purity. The best way to understand the state of purity is to look at the children unless all religious aspirants become as innocent, guileless, and pure as children, they cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Kingdom of heaven and realization of God or spiritual realization and self-realization, all those things are really same thing told in different languages. So the point is that to have spiritual realization, it is important to have a pure heart. Now let us see how actually the purity has helped or has been observed in the lives of great sages and saints. The strongest virtue of a saint is his purity. He attracts all of them by this virtue alone. If you remember some of the favorite saints that you may be knowing or you have respected, you'll find the main point of the attraction is not their knowledge or the way they have lived or whatever it may be, but the strongest point is their purity. That means they are so pure in their life. He attracts all to them by his virtue alone. Often behind the learned utterances of the philosopher, one does not discover any worthwhile truth. But a word or two from a pure-hearted man changes our entire life. We go to the learned lecturer. His logic stimulates our mind, and his oratory sends a thrill through our entire being. We are caught in the glamour of his language and rhetoric, but when we leave his presence and try to find out what we have learned from him, we sadly realize that we have written nothing of his lecture in our memory. There is a very good example that has been given, and some of you might be knowing also. You know, Swami Vivekananda was a great orator, and he presented Hinduism for the first time in the Parliament of Religion, and that created great impression. And he himself had admitted that at that time my state of mind was very, very pure. That is why the impact was that he actually, during some conversation with one of his disciples, he said that. He also, how actually that happened, he pondered later. Now, there was a contemporary philosopher who was contemporary of Swami Vivekananda. His name was Sir Brajendranath Seal. They went to the school together. That means they studied together. But Brajendranath Seal, Dr. Seal, was one or two classes senior to him. And he was very famous. That during his lifetime, he was a very famous philosopher of India. And he was a very sought-after speaker also, because his rhetoric and all those things were very, very powerful. So it is said that somebody suggested that if you want to listen to some rhetorical speech, that means powerful speech, you should listen to Brajendranath Seal. And that young man wanted to listen, so he went and listened to one of his lectures. Then the friend who actually had suggested to listen to that asked that, is it not true that he was a very powerful speaker? So he said, yes, you said that he is a seal, but I found him to be a hippopotamus. The point is that his rhetoric was so flowery, the words were so well chosen and big words that it created, that means it creates awe, but it does not go inside. That is the point. On the other hand, go to a simple man. So this is the point, is that philosophers can give definitely very learned lectures, but ultimately you see the things come to the person who is really very simple. That means same truth can be said by a person, by a philosopher, and at the same time the same thing can be said by a person who is really spiritual, pure in heart. So there will be some differences in that. On the other hand, we go to a simple man who can hardly speak two sentences correctly, most of whose instructions are imparted in silence. But still, the few words we hear from him are forever embedded in our mind and stand as a beacon light in the midst of our confusion and uncertainty. You know, there are many sages and saints that have come, that we find in India. They are unlettered, completely unlettered. Kabir was like that. Tulsidas, of course, was learned. And during our own time, Raman Maharshi, you know, he was very silent type of person. He used to speak very hardly a few words, but his impact is so, impact is so great that even those who have seen him or those who go to his place feel the vibration of his spirituality. He was a simple man, that means just pure-hearted, ordinary person. The reason is that the one is endowed with purity. That means why this confusion is there, why this difference is there, because the purity is the base. The reason is that the one is endowed with purity, while the other is merely a learned man without his cardinal virtue. I can tell you, I have heard from, probably you will find in writing also, that means during the time of early 20th century, that means some of our young men who were attracted to the ideas of Swami Vivekananda were students of philosophy. And they used to go to in Calcutta, there is a very well-known college, now it is an university known as Presidency College. And in Presidency College, there are students, and there is a very well-known, professor of philosophy. His name was Dr. Surendranath Dasgupta. And also, at the same time in the university was Dr. Radhakrishnan, who later on, became the President of India. And he was just a professor of philosophy. But these young people who used to go to, or their students in the college used to attend the classes of Dr. Dasgupta and also Dr. Radhakrishnan, they also had heard about Swami Vivekananda, and they had the opportunity of going and meeting the other Swamis who lived there. So by comparing these two sets of people, like the philosophers and these monks in the order, they found that ultimately they are more attracted by the purity of these monks, who most of them are not highly educated even. So in that way, they chose the path of coming to the what is called Ramakrishna order, they had said later on. Even if men forget all about Christ and Christianity, even if all scriptures are drowned in the ocean, still, if that one sentence, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God," is preserved and practiced by one man alone, that will save humanity. This is, of course, a paraphrase of Swami Vivekananda's quotation. He has in many places said that if all the, what is called scriptures and all the sayings of all sages that have come in this world are forgotten, or somehow some catastrophe happens, but this one sentence remains, from that actually the whole spirituality can be grown. That is the point. It can be the seed of whole spirituality. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So, what is purity? Purity is a state of being untainted by evil, of not being led astray by desires, and not being allured by temptations. It is a simple way of saying what is purity. And if you look at a child, especially a very young child, you will see they are unsullied. That means they are not affected by outside thoughts, ideas. They do not know anything. Innocence is there. So that is the way purity can be perceived or understood. So let me repeat. It is a state of being untainted by evil, of not being led astray by desires, and not being allured by temptation. So there are the three major aspects of this purity that we see here. We are not conscious of it when we possess it. That is the point. But when we lose it, we know that we have been robbed of a great treasure. It is just like losing the teeth. That means at the time, of course nowadays dentists are there, good dentists are there, and this dentist has advanced a lot. But in the olden days, it was really very difficult. That means if you lose a tooth, then you know what is called the value of a tooth. So purity is like that. When you lose it, actually you know what we have lost. It is the original state before any guilt, the virtue of the child which has no merit in it, yet is a moral quality of the highest worth. Now, a pure soul with his unsullied simplicity, guilelessness, and straightforwardness sees through heaven and earth as it were. So what is the benefit? What actually a man possessing purity what is his personality if you call it? So it is like this. That means a pure soul with his unsullied simplicity, guilelessness, and straightforwardness sees through heaven and earth as it were. With an intuitive directness, he faces the battle of life, and comes out of it unscathed. There is something in the pure which is convincing, irresistible, and redemptive. So that is the natural quality. It is not that he had to cultivate it or he had cultivated it, but it is because of the naturalness of the purity actually, these qualities are evident in that person. So if you can remember the lives of these great saints who have influenced us, you will find that these are really true. That means these have been collected by studying the lives of those saints. Purity is the deepest yearning of our soul because it is our basic virtue. That is the point. That means we were, at the beginning, definitely all of us were what is called small child. So naturally we had possessed, that means we came with the purity within ourselves. But slowly as age advanced actually because of the what is called surrounding things or what maybe under the circumstances, we have lost that. Purity is the deepest yearning of our soul because it is our basic virtue. The fall of Adam and Eve from paradise is only a story which teaches us how man, by entering into the manifold experience of the world, has been deprived of his birthright by perfection, birthright of perfection. So that is the situation with us. That means we came pure, but because of the circumstances, situation, training, education, whatever it may be, so in that way we have lost that birthright. That means we came with that virtue within ourselves. The fall of man is more or less the philosophy underlying all religions. And what is religion? Religion is going back to the original state. That is the thing. So the fall of man is more or less the philosophy underlying all religions. According to the Hindu theory, there is no actual fall. We have forgotten for the time being our real nature. It is always there. We have only to rediscover it. We are now hypnotized by the moral values of illusory world. The purpose of religion is to dehypnotize ourselves. The nearer a man approaches his goal, the more he captures his lost purity. He has less and less to conceal. Secretiveness becomes alien to him. So in this way, if something is not already within ourselves, actually it is not possible to cultivate it. You cannot really infuse these virtues within ourselves. So it is, according to Vedanta theory, originally it is there, it is underlying, but it has been covered with this, what is called the darts of the world, if you call it. In that way it has happened. People are puzzled by that directness. If you see a pure person, or when you read the lives of great spiritual persons, you find that their directness of their conduct is very impressive. So in that way, we see that is the great advantage or great benefit that we get from them. So there is one writer, Nikolai Hartmann. So he has written a book of ethics. So in that, we find a very nice description what it is. As the impure mind has an evil influence and infects with evil, so the pure mind has an influence for good. That is the great advantage. That is why we say that we need holy company. Holy company is nothing but what is called going to a person who has cultivated holiness, or who has really brought out his what is called purity, and just by going near to that person actually can become holy. In this respect, pure-mindedness, despite its originally negative character, shows itself to be an eminently positive and creative energy in life. Nothing perhaps works so powerfully, so convincingly for good, and so transforms others in their innermost character as the mere presence of a pure-minded person who pursues the right undisturbed, just as he sees it and understands it in his simplicity. You can imagine of Sri Ramakrishna, you will see that all the direct disciples who were attracted by Sri Ramakrishna or other disciples who were attracted not because of philosophical exposition, but by his purity, that means by his love. That purity was perceived as love by these persons. In that way, actually, they are attracted. Swami Vivekananda in one place has said that if you ask me how we will define Sri Ramakrishna, he said that love personified, that means attraction, that is the power of purity. Precisely, in his obliviousness to evil, in his failure to understand it and to react to it, he becomes a symbol and attracts the fallen and the morally prostrate. So that is, of course, that great writer has said this is the effect of purity of a person. Now, an absolutely pure soul carries with it a great redemptive spiritual and moral power. That we see in the lives of Jesus Christ, that many people came and they were really benefited by his influence. There is a beautiful incident in the life of Sri Ramakrishna also. That means how actually a pure person can wash away impurity by mere presence that we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. You know, when Sri Ramakrishna was practicing spirituality, and people thought that he has gone mad. That is the first thing that other people will think that it has happened. So naturally, the owners of the Kali temple, Dakshineshwar Kali temple, though they liked Sri Ramakrishna, but because of his craziness, they thought that he needs to be cured. That means some sort of treatment needed to be done. So, but one of them was Mathur Babu, who actually was a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna. He thought that probably because of his practice of purity too much, actually he has become this crazy, or he has lost his mind. So he took him to some immoral, that means where the immoral women used to live. In that way he thought that probably by contact with them, his mind will change. But it acted oppositely. That means when they saw Sri Ramakrishna, they fell at his feet and said that please excuse us. And in that way, later on they become devotees. That also there are instances that we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. And some of them later on become very famous in their career also. So they have written their experiences or reminiscences about these incidents when they came in contact with Sri Ramakrishna. Now the pure soul exerts its redemptive power over the evil-minded, not by emphasizing their evil nature. That is also another aspect. You will not say that you have this type of what is called impurity in your mind. You tell lie or whatever it may be. It may be in that way. They do not point that out. It is not the way they actually what is called cure others. Not by the pure soul exerts its redemptive power over the evil mind, and not by emphasizing their evil nature, but by directly putting his finger on the essentially divine spark in them, which is never extinguished. This trustfulness is his great power, and by it he discerns all dubiousness and hypocrisy. Anyone who comes into the charmed circle of the pure soul at once feels his elevating influence. This is more convincing than the study of holy books. Therefore, all religions recommend the company of holy men as the greatest purifying agent in life. Tirthankara Tirthani, there is a saying in what is called Narada Bhakti Sutra, that means how a place becomes holy. Because these persons, holy persons, congregate there or they visit there. By their association with that place becomes holy. So you go to Varanasi. Varanasi is not really a city which outwardly will look really holy. It is a very dirty city. But still it is very holy. That means holy persons have gone there so many times, or they have lived there for what is called thousands of years. So naturally there is a vibration of what is called purity and spirituality from the point of view of what is called when one can palpably feel if the mind is really open. So in that way we see that they exert, these holy persons exert their influence in holy places. And not only holy places, those who come to them, they are also benefited by his presence. In ancient times, religion prescribed the ceremony. Now, how actually we can cultivate? Because if you think that you need to cultivate purity, so there should be some way by which actually the purity can be regained or discovered. In ancient times, religion prescribed the ceremony of purification for the wiping out of guilt. That is also there. You know, we do pujas and all those things, yagnas, all those things, so that spirituality can be developed in the mind. In that way we do that. But still in ancient days it was very common. That means people used to do different types of fire services and all those things that we find in the Vedas that are described. But Christianity substituted the formula of forgiveness and salvation through the suffering and sacrifice of the divinity intervening for man. This is a very unique aspect of Christianity. That is there as if Lord Jesus Christ suffered what is called this, all these difficulties or this pain for the purity, that means for the salvation of the humanity. That is the belief. Purity returns as an act of grace. The method is simple. The method is the simple act of belief. Religion alone shows the way to a Mary Magdalene, that was the devotee of Jesus Christ, to become a saint. But this is not any mechanical sort of belief. Neither it is a mechanical observance of ceremonies. Such purification arises from a firm conviction in God as the source of all goodness and purity. So this is a matter of, if you want to purify yourself by not doing anything, just have faith and belief in the redemptive power of God, and God manifests in Christianity, God as manifested in Jesus Christ. So in that way, the purity is regained, if you call it. A living contact with such a God washes away all dirt and filth. A living faith is absolutely necessary. That is the point. It is a matter of a personal conviction by which actually one can really gain this purity by having faith in persons like Jesus Christ. Now let us come to what is called Vedanta. According to the philosophy of Vedanta, the soul of a man is never contaminated. That means it is, Vedanta has said, in our Vedas and Upanishads it has been said, each soul is potentially divine, as Swami Vivekananda said. Why potentially? It is a divine, but we actually do not look at it. According to the philosophy of Vedanta, the soul of man is never contaminated. It may be hypnotized into believing in the manifold of experience, but its spark of divine nature is never extinguished. As I told you a little earlier, if the divinity is not there, if purity is not there inside, it is not possible to infuse in it, because it will be a foreign material in the personality of a person. So it should be there, only thing it needs to be cultivated or enlivened. The sun may be covered for the time being by a patch of cloud, but however thick it may be, it can never diminish the sun's resplendence. That is the point. It is already there. That is the Vedantic view. Already there. Purity is there. Divinity is already there. But for some reason, actually, it is covered. Gold may remain buried under earth for thousands of years, but that cannot destroy the natural brilliance. It has only to be dug out, and the golden color at once reveals itself. Another analogy. Then another example, flint may be under water for years, but the moment it is taken out and rubbed against a stone, the spark comes out. So these examples shows that The innate divinity is there in the soul, only thing that it needs to be brought out. The idea of impurity comes when we forget our divine nature. If the student says with all the sincerity he can comment, I am divine, instantly he will regain his divinity. That is not only belief, probably it has been seen. It is possible. That means, probably under our own, what is called sanskara, that is called, it is not always possible for us to discover it that quickly. But it is possible in the company or by the grace or by the mere wish of a spiritual person, the divinity can come up within ourselves. That has happened. If you pursue the lives of great saints, you'll find that there are many instances of that. If the student says with all sincerity he can command, I am divine, instantly he will regain his divinity. But it must be done with all the forcefulness of his nature. Nothing in the world can destroy the divine element. The so-called sin may hide or cover it, but it can never destroy it. That is the Vedantic belief. The different religions of the world may quarrel about dogmas and creeds, but all agree on purity as the one condition of spiritual illumination. The spiritual disciplines enjoined by different religions have only one aim in view, namely, to enable the student to lead a pure life. All injunctions regarding self-restraint and self-control are motivated by this ideal alone. So that actually brings us to the how actually we can, we are not in the company of Jesus Christ, we are not in the company of what is called Krishna or Rama, not in the company of Buddha, not in the company of Sri Ramakrishna, Chaitanya, like that, but as we are. So what is our way to regain our purity? So that will be the practical what is called aspect of what is called discussion about purity. Religion says to the man who is tired of the complexities of life, come unto me, all ye that are weary and heavy laden, and I shall give you rest. The same message is declared in the Gita, quote, give up all ideas of moral duty, take refuge in me alone, I shall help you to reach the other shore of life. Again, we read in the Upanishad, he who seeks the pure truth with single-minded devotion, unto him alone the Lord of truth reveals himself. Same thing said in different ways and a different context. So you see that we have to take refuge what is we call a religion, at least spirituality. Otherwise, it is not possible. From these sayings, we can understand from these sayings that we have to take refuge in spirituality. The language may be different, but the message is the same. So it is only when this ignorance is removed that we shall realize our innate divinity, which is pure always and for evermore. So coming to this, up to this point, is that it is the only thing that we need to, what is called, gather, or we have to get. So now let us see how actually it can be done under our present day circumstances. Now the three important disciplines to be practiced regularly according to Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother are meditation, study, and selfless work. Selfless work like the performance of one's duties, surrendering the results at the feet of God. Practicality, from the point of view of practicality, seeing the situation of the present day life. Sri Ramakrishna is not really historically not too far from us. That means what he has experienced, what he has seen, the present day life actually still holds good in these days also. So his teachings also holds good for us even today. So then here they have said, in such practice one should not lose heart or yield to despondency, the worst enemy of spiritual life. The ebb and tide is bound to be followed by the flow tide. Eddies and whirlpools are part and parcel of the river, but after passing through them, we can reach the other shore where we will not be affected by eddies and whirlpools. That means faith is necessary in the teachings of these great saints. That is the most important thing. So Shraddha is the main thing. Faith is a solid foundation on which the whole spiritual quest has to be based. Purity is another very important factor for which one has to work. One has to keep one's body and mind undefiled. It is a practice common to all spiritual aspirants. You will find this has been said in the Patanjali Yoga Sutra also, purity and all those things, yama, niyama. So in the same thing has been said in a different language for us in our present age. Now the two central requirements for purity are the discrimination between the real and the unreal and giving up of the unreal. It is also power of discrimination according to path of Jnana Yoga, as you know. So you have to figure out, that means we have to always think which actually will lead to us to spiritual growth. In that way, we have to throw away or we have to shun which actually is really not conducive for the spiritual growth. Humility should not be mistaken for politeness or courtesy. They are artificial means and devices to eliminate unpleasant situation. A spineless man is good for nothing. True humility is based upon spiritual perception. Through spiritual discipline, one sees that God dwells in all, in the persecuted, in the oppressed, in the lowly, in the poor. This realization makes one truly humble. So if one can feel, or at least superimpose, if you call it, the presence of God or God's manifestation in all sorts of people who are all around us, then actually actual humility will come. Otherwise, this concept of superiority, inferiority, and all those things will always bother us. One respects all, uninfluenced by the scholarship or social status or economic position. So, study of scriptures actually help us in this way. Another aspect that Sri Ramakrishna has emphasized, as you remember in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, when M went to Sri Ramakrishna for the first time, so he said, how actually one can reach God? He said that first you have to go to solitude. That means solitude is very helpful for reflection. That means what is going on in the mind, you have to observe. Then actually you can take some steps which gradually actually make the mind fit for spiritual realization. So solitude is another factor recommended by spiritual seekers. The mind with which we work towards our spiritual goal requires strength and depth. Restlessness and fickleness can be easily overcome with the help of solitude. So there actually, that is the importance of solitude. A quiet place, there actually you can observe your mind, and once you observe, it is said that mind is like a child. That means if who actually is afraid when somebody is seeing, actually he will refrain from doing notorious things. So in that way, actually, observant mind actually quietens the mind also. Then only it is possible for us to live in society and face problems with calmness and ease. Solitude can be practiced every day in one's own house or room. Quietness, a quiet corner. And when somebody is not there, in that way actually if we spend some time, that will be helpful. One has to be very particular about intimacy with worldly and selfish people also. That Sri Ramakrishna also has said that you should be very careful when you meet people, and that we know that Girish Ghosh, when he started coming to Sri Ramakrishna advised some of his disciples, and especially young disciples, not to go near him, then not to, go in his company. But few selected one he actually allowed. In that way, he knew that young minds are not really ready for having the influence of a person like Girish Ghosh, at least at that point. One has to be very particular about intimacy with worldly and selfish people. Their intimacy will stimulate worldly instincts. We have thus to promote and cultivate holy company to stimulate spiritual aspirations. In the company of the holy, noble and truthful, in the company of the holy, noble and truthful, one feels inner peace. Among the three disciplines practiced by Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, meditation and its predecessor, Japam, are common to all Hindu mystics. We will find that repetition, of course in Christianity it is also there, that repetition of the name and meditation are two tools which actually can purify the mind. That has been advised, and it is Advice in a sense that it is practical. Other austerities are not really practical under certain circumstances. It is possible, but it may not be universal. But this meditation and repetition of name is really universal under any circumstances. So in this way, we see that, let me end my talk, how actually Holy Mother Sarada Devi, when herself, when he used to say how actually she practiced her spirituality. Japa or repetition of the name of, or word of God purifies the mind and creates inner calmness and leads us to a meditative temperament. God's name is considered to be very powerful in gathering the scattered mind, thus leading us from a lesser strength to a higher strength. Though in the beginning, japam, that means repetition of name, may sound dry, God's presence has to be felt hidden inside in His name. All the wind blows away the clouds, God's name blows away the cloud of worldliness. Then only the mind will be steadfast. The natural tendency of the mind is to be drawn to the world. Japam directs it inward. And Holy Mother Sarada Devi performed japam every day, 15 to 20,000 times, to set an example to the devotees. So this is a very practical and you can say even mechanical way of purifying the mind. The nature that we have lost actually can be regained by the repetition of mantram that Holy Mother had shown. Of course, other things also needed to be done, but it is a practical aspect that she had advised or given, asked everybody to do, those who used to come to her. And she has challenged also, she has challenged that you do 20,000 times of repetition of the name. If you find no result, I think 2 years or 3 years or something like that, he has said, then come and complain to me. And in the same way, Swami Brahmananda also had said that if you do it and if you do not get any result, come to me and not only report to me, but you can slap on my cheek also. So these are the challenges that they have kept because they themselves have found the benefit of this type of practices. So these are some thoughts that I had in my mind to share with you, and I thank you very much for your patience.
Any questions for the Swami?
Yes, please.
Swami, would you discuss Patanjali's writings? He talks about mortification of self. Would you discuss that, bring some light to that topic, please?
Mortification of self, as I remember, is that means austerities. Practice of austerities actually controls the mind. Probably in that context he has said. Austerities means that truthfulness, then what is called humility, all those qualities that has been mentioned in the Yama and Niyama, they are clubbed together in the word of mortification. So it is a practice of discipline in general.
Could you be more specific about the applications of mortification in relationship to sexuality or sensuality?
All right, I cannot say that because I do not have much experience in practicing that. So please excuse me from saying anything about that. Any other question, please? Please.
Maharaj, you talked about little children being pure.
Yes.
There's so much purity in being trustworthy and innocence. But they do carry all the samskaras from all their previous births.
Actually, yes, that is an important question. The point is that at least they are not still, if they have samskaras, they are still not in the fruition, that they have not come into play. Up to certain age, they are very innocent. But after that, actually, the samskaras start coming out, and in that way, what they are, they become.
Yes, and also some aspects, like I've seen from my experience and heard others also, like being little children, you also are like very cruel sometimes to like insects and grotesquely cruel.
Say it again.
Like like we, on little insects, for example, they don't sometimes smash it.
Hmm.
You know.
Out of innocence.
Okay. but as you grow, that kind of comes, like kindness becomes more natural.
After training, yes, yes. Yes, innocence means they do not have that what is called ability to distinguish or discrimination. Power of discrimination has not developed, you can say in one sense. So after training, actually they develop those things. So naturally, that is probably helpful for the society as such and for their growth. That is true. But innocency, that means if something is done in innocence, actually that is not a crime. That is the point, you know. But from our point of view, because we are trained and we want to look at these things from the point of view of what the society says or what we have trained. So in that way it becomes a crime. But from their point of view, it is never a crime. They are not affected by those things as the crime affects us if we do that. Yes.
Well, I think for anybody wants to become pure, there's going to be a willingness to become pure. And what would be like the prerequisite to someone's willingness to become pure?
If somebody wants to pure, what needs to be done, you mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, what could have preceded this, what could have caused this person's willingness to become pure? Because I would believe that a person can go through multiple lifetimes without having this willingness, and all of a sudden they have this willingness.
It's how the desire may come. There are many ways by which actually see they want to be pure, because life situation may be one of the things. That means life situation is such that he thinks that let everything go, let me be pure and perfect. Some examples might have been seen, or might have been heard, or might have been read, or to some extent, as I told you, it is innate nature. That means purity is the innate nature of human being or all being. But it is it is undercover. So naturally, if some circumstance come, naturally it will try to come out. So in that way it happens. Yeah.
You said you have to try to stay away from selfish people,
Mhm.
stay with spiritual people.
Right.
So how do you do that and at the same time have that humility you talked about seeing it in all people?
Mhm. Yes, seeing all people as what is called God, it is an advanced stage, definitely. But at the beginning, it is necessary. That means how to reach to that state will be what is called a power of discrimination have to be applied. So after it matures, when the power of discrimination matures, automatically one feels that this is the good company or this is not the desirable company. All those things come. Yes, you have to be very careful. That is why it is necessary to practice discipline at the beginning, to go to the holy company, and until and unless it matures, actually you have to be very careful.
What about the ego?
Ego itself is an impurity. That means purity means it is what is called I-ness or all those things that are part of the ego that will be absent. That means it will be full of humility and other good qualities that really a part of the purity. So ego is really a sort of detrimental to purity, something which is detrimental to purity. Sure. Okay.
Many thanks, revered Prapannanand Maharaj, for this beautiful exposition of an important topic. He not only told the importance of purity in heart, purity in our awareness, in spiritual life and in life in general. I mean, he also showed the way by which one can become pure. In that sense, this whole talk was a very practical one to know that we need to become pure. And then how can we become pure? Both were beautifully blended in his talk. Many, many thanks, revered Maharaj.